Hi, welcome to Everyday NLP Bites Season 3. If you haven't been watching or listening to the earlier podcasts, my name is Florence Madden. I'm an NLP trainer and coach based in Cumbria in the north of England. I'm also the author of The Intention Impact Conundrum and the co-author of Everyday NLP, a book I co-wrote with my friend and associate, Eleni Sarantanu. In this season of podcasts, well, I've entitled it In Conversation With, because what I was curious to find out is how people have used their NLP skills. And I'm delighted today to welcome Karen Falconer, who is the Chief Exec of ANLP, and she'll tell you more about what ANLP is all about in a little while. So I've invited Karen because I do want her to talk more about ANLP, but I also want her to get her answer to these questions, which is, what is the concept in NLP that has meant the most to her? And secondly, what difference has that made in her life and work? So Karen, it's over to you. What's the concept in NLP that has meant the most to you, and how has that impacted in your life and work?
So, being an options person and liking choice, I think there are two things that really mean a lot to me in NLP. Firstly, the presuppositions of NLP, which I think are just so powerful. Because they kind of act as a philosophy for life. And when I first came across the presuppositions, I must confess I was slightly befuddled by some of them. They didn't quite make sense to me. Things like every behaviour has a positive intention. And I sat with that one for a long time, thinking I really don't understand that. And when I got to the stage where it was actually every behaviour has a positive intention for the person exhibiting the behaviour, suddenly it just puts a new context on an understanding. So the presuppositions of NLP kind of give me an understanding of life. And that's what I value. And I think once I've worked out, because again, when I first learned about them, it was very much, these are only going to work when the whole world knows about them. And up until that point, how is it going to help? And once I realised that actually what I understand about them, what I know to be true, the philosophy that I hold, that makes my life easier. And that kind of was what it became about, is it makes my life easier to use that philosophy in understanding behaviour.
Yeah. Often when I'm training them in, I say to people, this is something that will manage your blood pressure. Because, of course, not that I have any medical qualifications, you understand, but yeah, it is about when we're managing our behaviour and our state, that's got to have an effect on other people, and therefore, by implication, an effect on, well, I suppose, the outcome in any situation.
Yeah, exactly.
So the one that you mentioned already, that behind every action is an unconscious positive intention, is often one that people pick out, particularly on their first view. Were there any others in particular that have meant something in particular to you?
Well, most of them. I think the one that I probably hold closest to my heart is about respecting another person's model of the world.
Yeah.
Respect is one of my core values. So I think that one enables me to always be able to stand back and just look at where someone else is coming from, and understanding that maybe where they're coming from might not be the same place as where I'm coming from, and just understanding that that's okay.
Yeah.
And that it's not about right and wrong, it's just about having different perspectives. And I think that one is so powerful. And certainly, I think that one could be one that could be taken on board by governments and warring factions and that sort of thing. It's just it's just another person's opinion, really, and it's okay.
Yeah, and you don't have to agree with it to treat it with respect. Yeah, and far less adversarial.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, my experience of training them in is that people think, well, you know, well, how can this be true, or looking for truth in them? But it is, as you say, it's a philosophy, it's a way of looking at life, it's a way of, I suppose, managing your own state, and therefore how you're interacting with other people.
Absolutely.
So that's made me curious to ask, how did you first become involved with NLP?
Naivety. I was in the fortunate position back in the day when there was still such a thing as an evening class. We'd recently moved to North London, and so I thought, well, a good way to get to know other people and know more about the area we'd moved to, I picked up the evening class brochure, and there was a 5-week introduction to Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and that was all it said.
Right.
So I thought, well, it's either going to be something about computer programming, which I'm quite interested in,
right,
or it's going to be something about personal development, which I'm quite interested in. So I signed up. and after that, that was a 5-week introduction. It was amazing. It completely opened my eyes. And I went from there. One or two of the other people on this intro course were interested in taking it further. So we all joined together and then went on a practitioner course in North London as well. And then we sort of, we all diversified after that, and our journeys took us in different directions. But yeah, that was my start of the journey to NLP.
So tell me more about your involvement with ANLP and how that started, and, well, maybe if you're up for it, where it's going. Well, perhaps actually, because I don't know how many people watching or listening to this know what ANLP is. So that might be a good starting point. So if I start off by saying to you, what's ANLP, Karen? And secondly, how have you become involved with it?
So we are the Association for NLP. And I suppose when I'm explaining it, I say we're the professional body for NLP, because certainly within the UK and many other countries, people will understand the premise of a professional body. So NLP is not regulated per se, certainly not in the UK. It is in some countries, but not in the UK. So as a professional body, what we can do is provide that sort of self-regulatory framework, that code of ethics, the safety net for the general public, so that practitioners and NLP professionals have a framework from which to operate and have a sort of guide, if you like, to professional practice, and the general public have a safety net so that they know that the professional that they're employing has got a backup, and they have a backup if something were to not quite go according to plan.
Yeah. So tell me about your involvement with ANLP.
So again, probably naivety to start off with. Funnily enough, linked with my practitioner course. So many years previously on my practitioner course, I had been the demo subject for the well-formed outcomes. And my goal that I had shared was that I one day wanted to have this sort of, at the time I suppose I was envisaging a proper physical environment, but an environment where like-minded people could come to share ideas, to feel part of a community, and to just kind of be involved with each other, out there making a difference. I think because so often when people go on courses, certainly when I used to go on courses, I'd go on a course, life would be amazing in this bubble, and then I'd go back to real life and kind of hit the ground with a bump. And NLP is one of those things that really, that's part of the reason I did it in the first place, was because people had said it's something that had stayed with them. So I thought, well, therefore, if it's something that stayed with them, it's worth taking on board and becoming empowered by NLP, which is what it does really. It certainly did that for me.
Yeah.
And so ANLP ended up becoming the way that basically the director of the old association was my trainer at practitioner level. And many years later, she called me to say the association was about to go into liquidation. Was I still following that particular dream, and would I be interested in taking it on? And kind of very heart-led decision, said yes. Then my accountancy head, because I used to be I was still at the time, a management accountant and an accounts trainer.
Yeah.
I kind of looked at the numbers and looked at the figures and thought, wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, from a head-based assessment, but heart and gut were saying, do it. So I did.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we often talk about the three brains now, and it's not always just what's going on up here that is always the best guide. So how long have you been involved with ANLP now?
So I took over the association in 2005. So what's that, 15 years now, going into our 16th year, which is quite a while. Look, we'd like to say I hit the ground running. I think I stumbled, fell, and picked myself up again. That's certainly that first year, so many times that I had permanently bruised knees. And it was just a case of staying on the journey, really.
So what are your ambitions for ANLP going forward, or how do you see the organization change or develop, if indeed you do see it changing a great deal?
I think that's the wonderful thing about NLP, is that it's constantly evolving, and even though we kind of think we know it all and we've got to grips with it all, the whole point of NLP is it is empowering and enabling, and so therefore there's always something else to move on to, and move into and grow. And that's what's so amazing. I mean, we certainly have plenty of room for growth. We launched our new website last December, just before Christmas, which had been probably a bit too long in the making, an interesting journey in itself. And we felt, it's funny, we sort of came into 2020 thinking, this is our year. We've got the new website up and running, and we've got all our foundations in place, and this is our year to grow and thrive and really make a difference out there, even more than we are already. And of course then the world got slightly stalled by the pandemic, which was interesting and really in its own way has been such an amazing learning. Because there's so many things that we had on the back burner, ready to, wouldn't this be wonderful? One of the things we wanted to do this year was have a wellbeing campaign that could start pushing NLP out more, and kind of, selling NLP, and then saying, and this is where you find good NLP professionals who are ethical and professional and credible, come in this direction. And that's one of the benefits of the pandemic. Every cloud has a silver lining, and I know there's lots of awful things that have happened, and it enabled us to pull our members together and put resources together so quickly for people who needed them throughout this really challenging time. And that led on to we were already partnering with Mind, the charity, on a very small scale. And once we put our COVID-19 resources together, we showed them to Mind, and Mind said, these are great. And then they started, well, how can we use this? And they wanted to elevate it further. So it's kind of that growing of exposing NLP, the good things that it can do.
Yeah, and I think I'm, as a member, really heartened to hear that, because we had a conversation before the podcast started that sometimes people wonder what's behind the doors of NLP, what's the relevance of that. So, as as a member, as someone who has an interest in NLP for decades now, I'm really heartened to hear that those resources are there and continue to be there, and that's the direction of movement, to feel like just to get people behind those doors, to say, okay, look, this is what's here and it's relevant to everyday life and work and well-being, of course, as well, not just
absolutely. It's sort of, I know it can make such a big difference in so many different areas, and that's probably the biggest challenge, is it's sort of trying to sell something, if you like, that can make such a difference in so many different areas. It becomes quite untenable and intangible. It's very hard to understand something like that. So it is, just as you say, it's about that everyday application. How can this be applied in this particular scenario? How can this be applied in this situation? How could this be used? And I still, the book that I do a lot of audible books, and the book I'm listening to when I walk the dog in the morning is pure NLP. It's not actually mentioned in the title. But again, it's still refreshing to me after all these years to, oh, that's interesting to apply that in that way.
Yeah. And it is about thinking and how do we think about things in a different way, because that sometimes our thinking is such an interference to our progress, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm, I say, hugely delighted, the more resource that's out there, so that people can understand what NLP is all about, and also what quality training is about. Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed since the lockdown is been looking online at the courses that are available, and a lot of things have no I can't speak for the quality of those courses, and therefore I'm certainly not criticizing them. What I'm saying is that for somebody entering into the world of NLP without any kind of organization, without any behind that to say, this is the syllabus, this is the standard, there are kind of no guarantees what people are going to get. And I think, there is so much out there that there needs to be something that people can say, well, yeah, okay, this is a reputable organization and the trainer is a reputable one, and I know what I'm going to get will be an internationally recognized qualification. And I think all of those things, really matter to people. The learning matters, of course, but knowing they're getting a good quality training, I think, is incredibly important. And, when you're a buyer of something that you've never bought before, then what guide do you have?
Absolutely, and that's the key thing. And that just what you were saying is sort of taking me in two different directions at the same time. One being that's part of what we do. So it's, we do have a complaints process, and somebody said to us, or people have said, that's such a negative way of looking at it. And again, it's back to the presuppositions of NLP, is meeting people in their map of the world. Because we might know it works, we've experienced it, we opened those doors and dared to walk through. And sometimes people just want their hand held, or they want a torch to go through those doors with. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's absolutely fine that people may just want that little bit of encouragement or a safety net or a nudge. So having those things in place, I mean, I have to say, our complaints process, I would say 95% of the time that we are asked to deal with a complaint, we have to turn it away because the person that somebody wishes to complain about is not a member of ANLP. And we can only deal with complaints against our own members. And that's testament to our members themselves, that actually having that safety net, having the complaints process, having the code of ethics means that our members are more likely to act responsibly, professionally, best practice and all that sort of thing, because of the framework that's in place. And it's so sad when we do have to say to people, I mean, we don't leave them with nothing. We will manage their expectations and advise them where they could potentially go, be it a legal redress or advertising standards or trading standards, and we do check with the other certifying bodies and international associations to see if this person is a member of any of them. Needless to say, half the time they're not, and that's the challenge, which is why it's our driver is to elevate the position of NLP and ANLP so that the public know about doing their due diligence beforehand rather than wishing they'd done it afterwards.
Well, actually, that's on that very topic. There may well be people watching or listening to this who are already members, in which case, we're preaching to the converted. On the other hand, there may be people, I'm hoping, watching these podcasts that are considering doing some NLP training. And so can you just remind us of the ANLP website, Karen, so people can go and have a look there? Yes. Obviously, I want them to train with me, but there are loads of other good trainers with the ANLP also.
And you are one of our members, and we do need to emphasise that. So yes. Who has gone through, we have checked your certification and everything like that. So that's what we do. We do the checks so other people don't have to. Yeah. To go to the website to find a trainer or a course, our website is www.anlp.org. We are a social enterprise, so we are there to serve the community, hence the .org.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Karen. And it was good to hear about both ANLP as well as what drew you into it, because that was things, I hadn't known about before. It's not a conversation we've ever had, but I really do thank you for your time today. And I hope that will also make more people curious about both NLP, but also just making sure when people make choices about where they do their NLP training, that they're using the resource that's there and they're well advised.
Absolutely. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you. And thank you everybody else who is watching or listening to this podcast. Karen is closing out this season of Everyday NLP Bites in conversation with. But actually, at the suggestion of some other people, there is going to be season 4, which is also going to be in conversation with. So that will be coming along shortly in about a week or 2. So thank you again for watching and listening. And I hope I'll see you on the next season also. Thank you. And thank you to Karen.